Hail and well met, everybody. Welcome to Geek, Thyself, a show by nerds, for nerds,
who love geeking out over random facts and esoteric trivia. My name is Heather.
I'm Russell.
And we'll be your hosts for this journey through the wondrous land of information. Hi, everyone. I'm back. And
Hi! We have Heather back! Yay.
Yes, although I was very grateful that Gabby filled in for me for an episode, and I love Pokemon, so it's always fun to hear people talking about them, especially because I'm not as familiar with the newer ones.
Neither was I, which is how Gabby had a lot of things to say about the new ones, actually. Because I'm an old person, not as old as you, but I'm an old person in regards to Pokemon, so I only remember the old ones.
Yes.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember the original ones. I'm interested to see what happens with Sword and Shield.
That's what we talked about a little bit of, because neither of us have Switches, but Gabby is in the process of saving to get one for this game.
Yes, I am tempted. I'm not gonna lie.
All right, so that was like the fastest tangent ever. Hi guys, how you all doing?
Hi everybody. So we're talking about one of our mutual favorite authors today.
Yeah, Agatha Christie. They have well over 100 stories in the forms of novels, novellas, stage plays, under many a different pseudonym. That's a fun word.
Yes, she wrote under a couple of different pen names over all of her years of writing, and like Russell just mentioned, she has over 100 stories and pieces of literature that she's written. Just books, literally just her books. She has 79, and she also wrote plays and stuff like that. So yes, it's a very long list.
Yes, I am aware of all this because during my formative years, I don't know if they're a thing in the UK, so I'm just going to do a quick sidebar. But it's a thing where you get like an issue every like 2 weeks or something, and eventually it builds up to be a full collection. I don't know if that's something you have.
You mean like a book subscription, but it gives you the entire series over time or something?
Yeah. They're called part works here in the UK. They're really popular.
So, I don't know if that exists over here. I love books to the point where it's like disgusting, and I have never heard of that particular type of service, so it may not be something that's very common over here. One thing we do have, which I think you guys have in the UK also because you have Amazon, is Kindle Unlimited.
Yes, we do have that.
So which I love. I use that because it saves me so much money. If you have an Amazon Kindle, there's this thing where you pay like $10 a month, and you can only have 10 books at a time downloaded onto your Kindle.
But you can change them out.
Exactly. You can exchange them out. So it's like having a constant stack of 10 library books that you just keep changing out as you go through them. So for someone like me, who's a ridiculously fast reader, I can go through a 300-page book in like 2.5 hours or less, depending on the kind of... Yeah, I know. It's weird. Depending on the kind of writing.
Okay.
I think my brother had me take a speed reading test one time, and I think I was close to 500 words a minute. Something ridiculous like that.
That's ridiculous.
I know. With comprehension, too. Like, I retained the information. So my brain just likes to read. Because of that, I would go absolutely, completely broke if I bought enough books to actually continue to read new things. Plus, my memory is pretty good, so I can remember the books I've read, which means I don't always want to reread them unless I really, really loved them. So yeah, I in order to not spend like $600 a month on books, I have Kindle Unlimited.
So you spend 10 and just read whatever you like. That seems like a good service. But yeah, basically what this part work was is every fortnight I'd receive an issue, and there were 85 issues all in total, with books, with all of their novels, all of their short stories compiled into like volumes, and all their stage plays, along with magazines that sort of went into detail about them all. It's a great series, actually. But
that's really cool. If that exists over here, I might have to look into it. I love Agatha Christie, obviously, since we're talking about her today. And I don't own her complete collection. And I like completion.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, it worked out at like $6.90, like $5.99 per issue at the time.
That's not that bad.
No, but they do it with everything in the UK. Like, you can do it with DVD collections. They did it with Doctor Who. Like, for when the series came out, they did it with pocket watches. Like, you could collect pocket watches and Earth gems. It's a weird business. It's a weird business.
So strange, and I kind of want that over here.
Maybe we could talk about that later, because I just thought about that. If you don't have it, that could be a fun thing to cover.
That would be fun to talk about, yeah. But no, that sounds like an awesome way. And the thing about that, too, I don't know about anybody listening or about you, but I like completion, but I also really hate it if you have, like, most of a set with the covers in one way, and then the cover changes. Like, when the publisher changes the artist or something, and suddenly the look is completely different. So you've got, like, 10 books in a row that all look pretty cohesive, and then you've got 3 books that are completely different color schemes and everything, and I'm like...
Oh, my God. Heather, Heather, you're touching on so many nerves right now. Yeah, what was nice about all these books is they all came with their original artwork on the front, like as well on the magazine, but underneath, if you didn't like the inconsistently, you could take off the covers and they are all consistent underneath all of them. So it was beautiful. But yeah, no, I can't be dealing with that either. That is one way to like get me, like, even to the point of not collecting anymore, because I'm like, I can't. I can't.
Yeah. There have been times where I, like, went to used bookstores to find the other covers just because I did not want the separate covers. Like, I've got a couple of book series that I've done that with. So
that's amazing, though. That is amazing.
Why are we the same person, but, like, in 2 different countries and a few years apart and different genders? And...
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we just are that kindred that we were meant to meet. I don't know.
There we go. And this is another huge tangent, but this was a fun tangent, so I don't care.
Great fun tangent. So, Agatha Christie, written so many things.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure when her writing career, like, started and ended.
I don't know the end date. I didn't look up when her last book was, or whatever, was published. Because the thing is, in my experience with people who do anything creative, whether it's art or writing or, you know, anything like that, even if they aren't necessarily putting out the product or publishing it or whatever, it doesn't mean they stopped doing it.
Yes.
So, like, I'm sure that even if she wasn't actively publishing, if she was able to, she was probably still writing just for herself, because that's, if you're using that as an outlet, then that's something you're going to keep doing. I do know that even though she had tried to publish beforehand, she'd written like 6 different books or stories and tried to get them published and been denied every single time. Her first, like, really published, put out there book, where did it go? I wrote it down, was The Mysterious Affair at Styles.
Yes.
Which she published, or was published, in 1920. And that was her first, like, real book that was published out there as a mystery. And then her first big success was 6 years later in 1926, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
Yes. That one holds a very special place in my heart, and we will get into later. I might be telling you too much there, but that's fine. So, yeah. That one, it was a bit... See, here's the thing. I want to talk more about this book. But if I talk more about this book, I will ruin the book for people. Have you ever read this one?
You know, this is one of the few that I haven't read.
Oh, gosh.
I've read a lot of her books, but my 2 favorite... Okay, so for anyone who hasn't read Agatha Christie, just to fill you in a little more on who she is, a couple of her nicknames are the Queen of Mystery and the Queen of Crime.
Yes.
She was famous for writing these crime and mystery novels and murder mysteries, and they're they're really, really good. They're really well done. They're the kind of books where, as you're going through the storyline, you're like, I have no idea who did it, because it could be this person, and it could be that person, and it could be this person, and I don't understand what's going on.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, at the end of the book, her main character pulls it all together, and your mind is just blown. Because as you were reading through, there's all of these little hints, and it's the kind of thing where everything is just so well written and so subtly done that it doesn't really click for you.
No.
But her main characters, because she's the one writing the book, of course, understand it, and they pull it all together at the end, and it's just like, oh my God, how did I not see that? Oh my God, it's perfect. How did I miss those details?
Yeah. But what's even better is if you keep reading those sort of novels, you eventually start to pick up on those little things, and then you feel like a genius.
Yes. Yeah, you start to pick up on the little hints that she's throwing in there if you've read enough of her stories.
Yeah. Small slight tangent. Back on the sort of magazines that came with the books, what I loved about those magazines is they didn't spoil who it was.
Oh, that's good.
So you could read through it and just get additional information about the people and still not be spoiled on any of the stories. Okay,
Which is awesome.
You were about to talk about your two favourites, I think?
Yes, sorry. So she's got a couple of different recurring characters that she used as the crime solvers. My two favorites are, I think, probably the favorites for most people.
Oh, yes.
I know she has others, but they're the two most commonly well known. One is Hercule Poirot, and I can never say his Hercule Poirot, I think is how you're supposed to say it. I don't speak French.
You said that very well, actually.
Okay, good. I've butchered French on my show several times, on this show several times, and I apologize for it every single time because it's bad. But Hercule Poirot and then Jane Marple are two of her big ones, also known as Miss Marple, and they're my favorites. So most of the books I've read involve those two characters. Any of her earlier ones or her more standalone ones, I haven't read all of them yet.
Yes. Those two became her most prominent characters that she wrote about, and there's a reason why most people associate with them in that kind of regard.
Yes.
I can talk briefly about my book, because obviously we've just talked about it. It's one of her first, and The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is one of my favourite ones. It does star Hercule Poirot, but and again, he is involved in a mystery. What's actually interesting about this book, while it might be one of the first she's written, it's actually after he retired.
That's right. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
Or reading it. Somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. So while we weren't privy to all of their previous excursions, they'd come later. The character was still very fleshed out and still amazingly easy to follow, even though you essentially had no idea who this person was.
And I like that idea too, because it shows how well thought out her characters were. Because even though she hadn't written anything else for him, she was able to go back and write more stories that involved his past history to turn him into the character she had created. Or she may have already had it in her head and then just put it on paper. You know, we can't say, or at least I can't say.
No, we can't. But I will say that during The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, previous excursions and adventures are mentioned that are covered later, which is really nice. Yeah. With certain people and places, and because he'd been living in this retired town for a little bit, people have heard about those kind of things, which is always interesting. But yes, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's really cool because it shows the level of detail that she took for her books. Because even if she hadn't fully thought out a plan for this Hercule Poirot character and was planning to write tons of books about him, because she may not have been. She hadn't had a ton of success yet, so she might not have been planning to make a series from him. But the fact that in her future books, because she knew she had created some histories for the characters, she went back and wrote them and made sure the names were the same and stuff like that. that I love that she took the time to do that detail. And it makes sense because you have to be that meticulous with the details if you're going to write a good mystery crime book. You have to.
Yes, you can't have plot holes.
No.
Which, to be fair, none of the ones I've read, I'm not a writer, that I've read have never had distinctly glaring plot holes. Although, you can think there are plot holes until you get to the end when it's all explained, and then you're like, oh, right.
Yes.
Okay.
I will say, some of the stories, the way that it's solved at the end, usually I'd say like at least 95% of the information is stuff that you learn throughout the book, but it's one of those things where it's so subtle you don't put the pieces together. But every once in a while, part of it is that the main character, whether it's Miss Marple or whether it's Hercule Poirot, or was it Tommy and Tuppence, I think is the couple that she wrote.
Yes, I believe so.
You know, whether it's any of those sets of detectives, sometimes there's a couple little pieces of information where when they're explaining the reveal at the end of the book,
they bring it up.
They break it down, and there's some piece of like chemistry or history or culture that they knew that was like a key piece in solving it that we just didn't have access to because it's a thing. It exists in the book or in real life if it's a chemistry thing or something. But it's just one of those things where it wasn't mentioned because he knew and they knew and made a note of it mentally. And usually it's mentioned, but it's not necessarily something where like X leads to Y leads to Z is explained until the end.
Yes. But that still doesn't cheapen it because
no.
Sometimes you can actually pick up on those things depending on how well read you are. And that actually does come up in this book, and what's frustrating me now is I have to stop talking about it. Because
before you reveal something?
Before I say too much, all I can say is it's beyond worth finding a copy, listening to it on whatever, like, because I prefer to listen to books now. This book is worth your time. Because you will... I have not met like anyone who I've recommended this book to and who have sat down and listened to it, read it, they have come back and we've had a good chat about it. So yeah. I mean, and honestly, the same could be said for like every single one of her books. I mean, one of her most famous, they just recently did another movie version of it, The Murder on the Orient Express. Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can't say the ending, obviously. We're not going to because we don't want to spoil it for you guys. But it's literally one of those things where at the very end, everything just clicks and your brain just explodes. And you're like, oh my God, how did I not see this? That makes so much sense. Oh my God, that's like, of course that happened. Like, how did we not know? But at the time, there's just so many different factors, and the way that everything is placed and the way that everything's put together, your brain doesn't put the pieces together until the very end, and then it's just crazy. Yeah, very much so. Sorry, my mic had a bit of a moment there. But I think that might be a good place to jump into our break. Yeah. Alright, so hi everyone, welcome back to the mid-roll. You know, the best part, the ads. So... Today I'm going to talk about World Anvil. World Anvil is one of the Nerdsmith sponsors. We've talked about them a ton, but they're amazing, and I can't recommend them enough. Everyone should go check them out, whether they be a dungeon master or a writer or even just someone who enjoys writing or reading good stories, because there's a lot of creative writing on the website. It's a platform for you to flesh out and develop your world as a DM or game master if you're not playing Dungeons & Dragons, or for if you're writing a story and want to flesh out the world that you're creating for that story. You can connect characters, you can create maps, there's all sorts of different amazing features, and it's free, unless you want to pay for the upgrade that has all of the extra features. Yeah, the more robust things. Yes, but it's amazing, and you should check it out. It's worldanvil.com. Mm-hmm. They've also just now launched beta testing their heroes features. Yes, just look cool. Yes. All right. So secondly, we're going to be talking about Die Hard Dice. Die Hard Dice produce high quality, beautiful dice.
So pretty.
So pretty. They have their own polyhedral lines as well as standard lines like with their Moonstone dice. But what really they focus on is their metal dice, which they created the molds for. Mm-hmm. So if you ever see those dice, you know it's from them. They're easy to read, they're beautiful, and they're still trying to create new designs with them right now. They're in their Spellbinder series, which they've got Royal, which is red and purple, and then there's a Phoenix one, I think, for gold and red, which are just gorgeous. And they're also now starting with accessories, because they've just released their Scroll of Rolling, which holds 2 full dice sets, and you can roll it up, and it's a portable dice tray and holds the dice. It's gorgeous. Check them out. If you do want to purchase anything from their site, you can use the code Geek Thyself to get 15% off your first or next order. So yeah, if you want to roll with the best, that's dieharddice.com.
And they, in honor of Pride Month, because this is June when this episode's coming out, they just released some new finishes, is I think the term, on their dice, so that instead of being the really super shiny, they're more matte or frosted looking, and they have a whole rainbow of the metal dice in those colors, and they're so pretty. You should definitely go take a peek. It's dieharddice.com. Also for Pride Month, Nerdsmith has a pre-sale going on right now. You can go to nerdsmith.org for more information. We've got links all over our Twitter and everything, but we are doing pre-sales for our Dragon Egg Pride pins.
Yep, I've looked at them. They're gorgeous. I am going to pick one up. Essentially, it's the first dice that... Not first dice. First pin that's being offered by Nerdsmith.
Yes. We have a pin line coming. It's in the works. But this is the very first one. It is a scaled dragon egg.
With the colors of the rainbow.
Yes, and the scales are in the Pride rainbow. And this month, for all of June, all of our pre-sale purchases, all those orders, every bit of the proceeds will be going to the Trevor Project, which is a wonderful organization that supports, it has anti-suicide and crisis counseling for LGBTQ plus youth who are in crisis or need someone to talk to, anything like that. It's an amazing organization, and for all our pre-sales, any money that Nerdsmith would normally make after costs is going to go to the Trevor Project instead.
Yeah, we love them. They do amazing work. They have a 24-hour crisis line, and that all needs to be paid for. So we're very happy to support them in whatever way we can.
Yes, definitely. They're amazing.
So yeah, if you want to go and check out the pins, you can go to www.nerdsmith.org/pride, and then you'll see the link, which has a beautiful high-res photo of the pins if you want to check them out. Please consider doing so. It all supports charity, but don't feel any obligation to do so. Finally, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we're about to say something, but finally, the Nerdsmith Network has spent time over the past few weeks highlighting some of the shows, and this week we're talking about Dear DM.
Yes.
Dear DM is run by our friend Joe Collins. Amazing dude. He sings, he plays D&D, and I don't understand how he has time for everything he does. No idea.
I don't think he sleeps.
That might
is really the trick. He must secretly be an elf, so he just has to meditate for a few hours to get his rest.
That must be it. You're right. Anyway, so
that would make sense.
So Dear DM.
But yeah, it's an amazing podcast. He interviews different DMs and asks them questions from his audience, as well as some of his own, to find out more tips and tricks for all of you who are at-home DMs. So whether you're a brand new DM and you're looking for those hints on how to get started, or whether you're a really seasoned DM but you just want some tips to kind of up your game, it's a fantastic podcast to listen to for that information. He's interviewed all sorts of people. He's interviewed the DM from Broadswords, and he's also interviewed Matt Mercer.
Logan was on one episode, I think, as well, wasn't he?
Yes. Logan was on at least one episode of Dear DM. I think he's a part of the bonus content as well. All right, and with that, let's get back into this week's episode.
So, we've just had a bit of a talk about my personal favourite book. Do you have one that you could talk about a little bit without obviously spoiling it?
There's so many.
Yes.
I'm trying to...
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to think where to start. I think it's easier to talk, for me at least, because I don't necessarily have one of her books where I'm like, this is it for me. This is my standout. The closest one would probably be Murder on the Orient Express. Just because of how incredibly well she figured out all the details to make everything come together at the end. Without giving away spoilers, from the title, you can tell that clearly what happens is someone gets murdered. That's not a shocker. Basically, the main character in this book is Detective Hercule Poirot. And he is Belgian, not French, which is very important in many factors, and very particular, but he's brilliant, a brilliant detective, and notices all of these little details. What happens is, again, short version with no major spoilers, what happens is there's a bunch of people on a train together traveling from one spot to another, and this particular train is known as the Orient Express because it's going through parts of Asia in the Orient. And what happens is someone gets murdered and they're on a train. So there's a limited number of people who could potentially have done such a thing. And Hercule Poirot has to start trying to figure out who done it.
Yes. What's interesting about this train is, of course, it is a non-stop train. So nobody who's on the train can leave. And there's still a considerable amount of journey left, which I think actually comes up as a point. It's been a while since I've actually read this one. Unfortunately, I should reread it because unfortunately, unlike you, my memory is bad enough that sometimes I can enjoy a book twice, which is really interesting thing with a whodunit because normally they're a kind of one and done kind of thing.
To a certain extent, yeah. It depends on how well they're written. I can reread an Agatha Christie book, no problem, because it's just so well written that it doesn't matter if I remember who actually did it at the end.
And sometimes it's fun to go back through it, to actually piece everything together. Now you know. I've done that a couple times.
Yes. Yeah, me too. I will say the most recent movie that came out, I think, did a pretty good job of portraying all of the characters and Hercule Poirot. I was a little, on the fence about Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot because I'm so used to the original actor. For anyone who's not ever seen one, I watched them on A&E over here. I don't know what station put them out in England.
It was ITV.
ITV. But there have been many, many series where her books were turned into mini dramas on TV. So basically either a really long episode or 2 long episodes, but not technically a movie.
Yes, it's about 2 hours long, roughly.
Yeah. And there's some that have been turned into movies as well, but it's like a part 1, part 2 sort of thing most of the time.
Yeah.
And
these mainly focused on Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot, and I believe we're about to say the same actor of David Suchet, who played...
Oh my god, I love him so much.
Interesting small tangent. He lives in in my town.
Oh really? Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I've never met him, unfortunately. But yeah, I live in a place called Burntwood. And just on the outskirts of that, the main sort of town is Lichfield. He lives within Lichfield.
That's awesome. Yeah, but he's the character is amazing. And he does such a good job portraying him in all of the episodes I've ever seen him in. So for me, he is Hercule Poirot. But I will say Kenneth Branagh did a good job.
Yes, actually.
But I think for me, rather than it being a specific book, it's the 2 characters, Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot, that I just, no matter what they're in, I enjoy the book. And it's for similar reasons. So with Miss Marple, for anyone who's never read one of her stories, Miss Marple is a much, much older woman. And she is... she's never been married. She lives by herself. She loves to knit. She's super sweet to everybody. She's just like the friendly little old lady, but she's also a little bit of a busybody, likes to know what's going on. but in a good way, not in the, like, gossipy, pain-in-the-butt way. And she goes around and ends up visiting friends and family, and these things just happen near her. So as opposed to being a detective who gets called in, it's more like the detectives are like, yeah, hi, Miss Marple, go away now, please.
Yes.
They want her to leave them alone. But she's brilliant at putting the pieces together.
Absolutely.
Because no one suspects her of anything.
No.
She seems like a sweet, slightly kooky old lady. And so nobody gives her a second look. They tell her things they don't tell the police. They're not as careful around her. They assume that they've tricked her whenever they lie to her. They underestimate her completely. And then at the end, she's like, actually, detective or inspector, this is what happened. And just gives all the information and solves the whole thing. Because everyone underestimated her, so she was able to gather all the information. And for me, being a woman.
Yes, absolutely.
Being someone who is not physically intimidating. I am very short. I am 5'1". Most people look at me and are like, oh, Pat, you're cute. Like, it's not, I am not physically intimidating or anything. And so with both of those factors, it is not uncommon for those of us who fall into that same category as me being underestimated because we don't look intimidating and we're female, which for a lot of people, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, automatically puts you into the, like, less threatening zone. And so seeing another woman who was also rather small, from what I recall of her description, being underestimated and then being like, actually, here's what happened, and I just solved the whole thing, was amazing.
Because obviously Poirot doesn't necessarily have that issue. He still can have a bit of a bumbling personality, like he's not like he's unintentionally getting into places where he shouldn't be. So like they both have that kind of atmosphere, and with him being multinational for most of the stories, that kind of helps play. It's like, oh, he's not going to understand anything, when of course he's the smartest man in the room.
Yeah, there's people who assume he doesn't. So, for anyone who isn't aware of it, there is a stereotype. And I think it's a true stereotype for both Americans, but also for British people. Especially back in the day when she was writing these books.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Like, it's not as much now, but way back when, this was a major stereotype. That British people thought they were better than everyone, and therefore underestimated everyone. Not saying it is true. It is a stereotype, which is not automatically true. So please don't at us. We're not saying it's true. But that was a thing back then when she was writing these books. And so Hercule Poirot is able to take advantage of that because he's foreign. So people in her books are often British, or there's some British and some other nationalities, but usually British focused because that's where what she knew. And so a lot of times they underestimate him, at least in part because he's foreign. Also, he is also a smaller person. He's described as being a more petite gentleman as opposed to like a big hulking bruiser of a detective. So again, that was another thing where I connected with him in that level, like being a smaller, less intimidating person physically. But also, he is extremely intelligent, which is, I'm not going to say I'm as intelligent as Hercule Poirot. That's not accurate. But I consider myself a fairly intelligent person, and I love information and I love data. So seeing another person who was smaller but fairly intelligent and had turned that into being able to solve all of these amazing cases was something I connected with.
Also, just as a point while we're talking about this, without violence. Because so many detectives are on TV now. And it's not a bad thing necessarily, but there's like Luther and there's Sherlock and stuff. There's always a fight. Or there can be a fight. While I understand why that's part of the narrative, it's so nice and refreshing to be able to go back to those where they never lay a hand on anyone.
Yeah. No, they really don't. No. There are a few instances where they defend themselves, but that is vastly different.
They will never chase someone down and tackle someone.
No.
But they will know they'll be back from their own hubris. and it's such it's just so refreshing and important to see personally, because I'm somebody who is a fairly large person, and like I don't feel they ever need to come across as threatening or intimidating. So to have somebody to idolize in that kind of respect who doesn't need it is amazing.
Yeah. I think the idea for both of them, that you don't have to be physically intimidating, you don't have to be violent, you don't have to be aggressive in order to be successful, is something that can resonate with a lot of people. So for all of those reasons, they are my two absolute favorite characters. I do like her other characters that she's written, and I like Tommy and Tuppence, which are a married couple who solved crimes together in several of her books. But I will always have a special place in my heart for Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot. And for anyone who doesn't like reading but loves mysteries, you can find a lot, I think pretty much all of her books, on audiobook. You can also find the miniseries that Russ and I are talking about, the ones that have the Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple mysteries. You can find them on like all over streaming platforms. I've seen them on Netflix. I've seen them on Amazon Prime. I've seen them on HBO and Starz apps and stuff like that, depending on what kind of options you have there. So they're not hard to find if you look. I mean, you could literally type in Agatha Christie into a search bar for pretty much any streaming platform, and you're gonna get something.
Yeah.
So, I was just gonna say, definitely an option. Yep. And I'm looking at our time on this episode.
Yes.
Which is already over 30 minutes. Sorry, everybody.
It's fine.
I'm thinking, so we talked about her books a lot this time around and what we loved about her writing. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if maybe we should do our next episode on her life.
Yes, because her life
was also very interesting.
Yes. Okay, yeah, I can get behind that, because if we're already ahead, we can make this like a 2-week thing. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so I think we're going to call it good on this episode right now, guys.
Yes.
But we'll be back again next week to tell you a little more about the author herself, who also had a very mysterious and interesting life.
Yes. All right.
All right. So we'll talk to you next week, guys.
Okay. Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Geek Thyself. Don't forget to check out all the other amazing content on the Nerdsmith Network. If you have any questions for either of us, you can get in contact with us on Twitter at geek_thyself.
You can also email us at geekthyself@nerdsmith.org. And please don't forget to go to iTunes and leave us a review, or also go anywhere you listen to your podcasts.
We'll be back next week with another informative and fun episode.
And until then, don't forget to geek thyself.